Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for groundbreaking episode number 5. I know it's been a journey and we'll keep sharing these episodes with you guys. Jacob Garza and my co-host Rogelio will be going over the rookie's guide to land investments and what actually works. So what we mean by that is, what what are the basics or some of the basics for investors and what they actually need to do or know, and some of the steps that new investors should be watching out for. So, one of the most important things to remember is that buying land is probably the easy part. Turning it into an actual successful project is the real challenge. And that's really the difference between being just a buyer and a developer, is turning a raw piece of land into a successful project and actually generating profits, because ultimately, you're not doing it because it's fun. You're doing it obviously because you want to make a product and you want to have some return on your investment. So our goal is to help you buy land with confidence here at Primera Land. So it means that you're going to take one smart decision at a time. Sometimes land can be very attractive based on price, based on location, based on many factors, because you believe there will be demand for it, because you believe there's a need for a certain thing to be put in place. Those are all great and dandy, but that's just one aspect. Is there demand is important, but how do you get there? And so that's probably the more important thing, because even though there's demand, if it's not viable, then there's no point in you capitalizing on that.
Yeah, and let's talk about what some small developers or anybody trying to do their own project needs to know before they start, working on their projects. We think about the Lugios project in La Villa.
Yeah.
And that is a project that has some challenges, planning, execution, everything.
Yeah.
That particular project falls within an area that has a flood zone, and that's the first challenge. It was a great price, but we knew that that particular project had drainage challenges. The problem would have been that if you're a rookie investor or rookie developer and you go in and buy the property and don't know about it, right? And then you don't put it
Budget.
into your budget. In our case, we did, and we anticipate the cost of fixing these issues, right? So the La Villa project it's a 5-acre development in the city of La Villa. Half of the property falls within floodplain, and there is a process to take that property out of the floodplain. In that particular area, it is stated the elevation of the project based on the base flood elevation. So therefore, to remediate a project, we just need to add some fill and add some additional detention so that we can offset, the displaced volumes of flood zone and do the process through FEMA, which is a clomber and a LOMA. And that's the process of getting that particular project out of it. And I mean, in our case, we were engineers. So whenever we were looking at this property, we looked at it and we did the diligence. So we knew that we needed to go through that process.
Yeah.
To develop this project. Unfortunately, not every developer goes through that feasibility process and finds out what they need to do, right? We also have another example of a subdivision that was too big, and you're going to have 100 acres and then not going to be able to sell all those residential lots. Basically, you create a problem to yourself. You end up developing that much land, and you made a capital investment to develop it, but there's only demand for so much. And what happens is you end up with a large subdivision that you need to sell lots, but you're only selling lots at a pace where that subdivision is gonna take you 5 years to sell all the lots. You create excess supply, doesn't help your sellers.
Yeah. So I'll go over a little bit about a rookie blueprint, something that, someone that's just starting out an investment or looking to invest or develop. What are some of the things you need to look out for? So firstly, you should always have a defined goal. What am I looking to do? Sometimes you'll see a property, man, that'd be great for a warehouse, or that'd be great for a commercial building, or that'd be great for a fourplex, or whatever it is that you're trying to build. And sometimes you get those rosy glasses where, you see a piece of land and you are so heavily invested in wanting to do fourplexes, for example, that, hey, this is great for fourplexes. And when ideally would be a different
Single family.
yeah, it might be better to be a single family in the location you're in. But you really want to build a fourplex, and you kind of want to force that land to work for you or for your project. But what you should really try to do is focus on the goal. What is it that I want to do? Do I want to do residential, commercial, or mixed use or industrial? What is it exactly that you're trying to do? Identify where there's demand for those things, and then ultimately research those areas so that you can find land in those areas that meet those criteria rather than just finding a random piece of land and you're like, man, this is a great shape for a residential subdivision, but it's in the middle of nowhere and there's no one that wants to live there and there's no demand, and you're creating a supply for something that has no demand. So that'd be the first thing. Define what it is that you want to do so that you can narrow your parameters and your search for that.
One other item, Jacob, is on the zoning items. Cities have specific zoning for properties, right?
Yeah.
And if you're buying a property that has a zoning for residential and you want to turn that particular property into, I don't know, a gas station or a three-story multifamily, now you have to switch the zoning from residential to commercial or to a high-density multifamily. And you may expect a lot of opposition to that project.
Yeah.
Therefore, zoning is
Yep.
very important.
And that's part of your design team's job as well. Once you identify a property, your design team should help you identify that. I mean, it'd be great if you know how to do it, but if you don't, that's what your design team is for. So that when you do your feasibility study, they'll tell you, hey, this property is zoned residential and you're trying to do commercial. It's very unlikely that they're gonna accept this or that they're gonna allow you to do this. Now, usually, a commercial, it's a little bit easier to do almost anything you want on it, except for industrial. But usually going up in category is harder in my experience. Now, aside from researching zoning, as Rogelio mentioned, floodplain is a huge cost. Sometimes you can't mitigate it on your property. Sometimes you would have to buy either additional property to mitigate it, or you would have to, work with your neighbors or, do some very extreme and expensive things that would completely destroy the viability of the project. So understanding and having a design team that is experienced with floodplain is important so that you don't fall into that trap.
Yeah. Just to give you an example, we have seen a property owner that come in with, I have 10 acres. I would like to develop this into XYZ project subdivision. And we learned that it's inside the floodplain. And in order to develop that property, he needs to basically cut nine acres just to make 1 acre work. That has happened.
Yeah, that's, and sometimes it can be viable. I mean, if
If that 1 acre is valuable,
yeah, imagine you have 10 acres off the expressway and maybe the back 9, you sacrifice them to develop the 1 acre in the front to put in a commercial building or, something, a hospital or
a Roth.
whatever it is that you're planning to do there, it may be worth sacrificing those back 9 to get the value out of the front
Yes.
one. So ultimately that's a decision, that as a developer you need to make, but having a team that understands that. And, obviously that goes into my step 3 out of, 5 simple steps, but my step 3 is commission the feasibility study. That's what you should have a design team for, so that they can identify these and help you with these issues. Step 4, and again, this falls back to the feasibility study, but plan your utilities, drainage, and access before you fully commit to a design and purchasing the property. So your feasibility study, you would ask your engineer, hey, I kind of, well, your engineer should do this, but, clarify it and make sure that your designer is providing this in their feasibility study. But usually they'll identify if there's any, outside work that needs to be done. Typically, your work inside of your property limits is generally accounted for, but sometimes you need to put in a wastewater line that's a mile long or whatever, a force main or a water line or whatever it is that that you need to do to get this project to work. It may require work to be done outside of your property, and those are things that need to be identified early on before you even purchase this property, because then now you have a property that you can't do the product that you need or that you want unless you have a huge investment outside. And it could be worth it. I mean, if you have 200, 300 acres that you're turning into a phased master community, it could be worth putting in miles of water line and lift stations and especially if the price is right for the land and you're planning to put in 1,000 homes. It's not as bad as if you're putting in 20. Fee gets distributed between those 20.
That's why doing a cost estimate is critical. You need to make sure that your project is feasible not only as a design, as a concept, but as financials as well.
Yeah.
That's something that bankers will look really close into. And whenever you're doing your sales, you need to make sure that you cover your project with, sales that can cover the cost of your project so that you can have a margin.
Create a realistic timeline and cost estimate. I know we all want to see that the contractor is going to do the work
In 2 months.
in 2 months, and he's going to do it at his expense, and he's not going to take any profit, and he's just going to charge you for the materials, and the work's going to get done without labor somehow, and and the price is going to be half of what it should be, but the reality is that's not going to happen. The contractor has to make money, and the engineer has to make money, and generally speaking,
Even the city wants to make money.
the city, there's you're doing a development. It has three major components of cost. The first major component is the construction. The second major component is the design. The third major component is municipality fees and what you're going to pay for them to review your projects, for them to inspect your projects. If they have park fees, how much you're going to pay them because you're not putting any parks, or if you are putting parks, well, then you cancel out some of those fees, but now you have a less efficient design. So you're using some lots, or maybe your engineer does it in a way that some lots that were ineffective could be turned into parks. There's many ways to go about it, but ultimately there's a lot of fees and that municipalities all take a bite out of a project that need to be accounted for. And then after you're done with all this, there's still additional stuff. Did you take a loan? What was your interest? How long are you going to be paying interest for?
Commissions on the realtors.
Commissions on the realtors. Yeah. I mean, you have sales. Are you going to sell them yourself, or are you going to work with, realtors? If you're going to use realtors to sell your land, you have to pay commissions. So ultimately, there's a there's there's a lot of phases that need to be planned for where money is spent that may not just be ultimately what people think. Oh, what's the cost to construct it?
Typically, most developers think it's just construction and engineering fees to develop a project, and
no,
everybody forgets about
all the municipal fees, power fees to bring gas out, whatever it is that your community needs. Everyone charges, and you have to pay everybody, and ultimately, those all eat into the profit margin.
Yes, sir. And I mean, if this is your first project and you need help, reach out to us.
Yeah.
We have experience doing these sort of projects, and we can help you out.
Yep. So I guess some of the things that we've discussed, and I'll recap some of them. Easy mistakes that a lot of developers fall into is going too big is the first one. You have to understand that there's a lot of costs associated, and sometimes you you see the perfect project, and this happens to everybody. It's happened to us where we bit off a little more than what we were ready to chew, and I would say it was borderline. It was just the market kind of turned on us, and we've been holding out on that project because of it. Obviously, when we purchased the property, the demand was there. It was great, but by the time we got it designed, a year later, the demand was not there anymore. So we've been holding out on moving forward with that development. So that's one of the things that I would say is a big issue that a lot of developers may encounter early on. The other big one that I think a lot of developers may encounter early on, once you've done it, you probably won't ever run into this issue again, but it's having your finances and your company structures in order. So if you don't have a few $1 million in your pocket cash right now already, and you're planning to borrow money, which is the way most people do it, even if you're planning to get investors, it's a good idea to have your finances and your company structure in order. And the reason being is if you were to go get a loan, you need to understand that a bank can't lend you money unless you have income that far exceeds your debts. So your income your monthly income has to exceed your monthly debt payment significantly. And most banks use a rate of 1.35 at minimum. So that what you have to think is, okay, if I borrow money, what would be my payment on that money? And that plus your current debts have to exceed your current income by at least 1.35 times. And that's if you're in good standing, good credit, everything is great, you have money in the bank.
Jacob, does that mean if I own all my equipment, I own all the land outright, and
You have a million,
yes, have $1 million in the bank, does that mean I'm not gonna be able to get a loan?
you can't get a loan if you don't have income.
Exactly.
So you can have $100 million in your bank account. If you don't have an income, a bank cannot lend you the money. So they base their lending based on your ability to pay the payment.
Yes.
So
And one other item is that sometimes people may think I have I made $60,000 last year because I deducted all my equipment and I took all these deductions. Well, with $60,000, can you pay, the loans on two or
$10,000.
three, yeah, 2 or 3 pieces of equipment, and you have $10,000 a month in loans? You can't.
So if your loan payment that you're going to the bank, you just the bank sees your statement. It's like your taxes say you made $60,000 last year. Okay. And you're telling me, your banker, that you want to borrow an amount that you have to pay $10,000 a month.
That's $170,000 a year
Yeah. So
in payments.
you're telling me that you only made 5,000 and you have to pay 10. How can I lend you this money? They can't. So that's a big mistake. I know we all want to save on taxes and we all do everything we can to lower the amount of income that we have so we pay less taxes. But when you're getting started in this business, it's important that you have an income.
And I would say that's probably the most critical hidden.
Secret.
That's a secret mistake that everybody makes that nobody says.
Yeah.
Yes.
So company structures are also important, not just because of you should have them in line regardless, because if you ever get sued or because of any other reason, if your company structure isn't correct, then you could, be found liable. And I recommend you always have an LLC to protect you. But if you don't follow the structuring of your own company, you could still get brought into a lawsuit because your LLC isn't in order.
Not compliant.
Yeah, it's not compliant.
And talk to an attorney of your choice.
Yeah.
That specializes in corporate structures.
Yeah.
That can help you out with this.
Yeah. So I guess one last thing is I want to go a little bit more into your teams. So there's 5 teams that you need to have total. The first is your design. And generally speaking, that's where you're going to have your engineer, your surveyor, your architect. Sometimes there's companies that have all of these. Sometimes there's companies that only do engineering and surveying. Depending on what type of project you're doing, you may have a much bigger team, but the very basics are engineers and architects. And typically, when you hire one or the other, they can sub all the other services for you. So typically, those are the main 2 that you would want to deal with is just one engineer, one architect. Let them handle all the other sub engineering for you. That way, you're only dealing with them as part of your design team. And I would say one is more important than the other, depending on what you're doing and when you're bringing them onto the project. So if you're working on a commercial plaza or a building, a skyscraper, something, where the building, like let's say a building where the building is going to be the primary subject of your development, a hotel, you're building a hotel. Typically, you probably want to have your architect first and then bring in your engineer, just because they could design the layout for your, this is what we're looking for in our building. And then your engineer figures out how to bring all your parking into compliance, how to do your layout, how you're going to get water, everything to that building. Your building is your primary concern. If you're doing residential multifamily, I would say you probably want to do your engineer first.
Yes.
And have him do all the layouts, whatever. And then your architect comes in and uses those lots. Okay, how can I make the houses that I want on these lots? Or how can I do the multifamily structures that I want? And generally speaking, you want them to work together, but there's some kind of predetermined sizes for a lot of these lots. Most of them are going to be the same. 50-foot wide is pretty standard. It's usually the minimum requirement for most cities. But if you already have an architectural plan and it requires a 60-foot wide, Well, then you would just tell your engineer, hey, I know you can do 50 here, but I need 60-foot wide lots because I already talked to my architect.
And that's part of knowing what you want to develop.
Yeah, that's part of the goal.
And for people watching from Mexico, that's something that is very different from Mexico. I know in Mexico, architects tend to do all of this development work. For here in the US, engineers are the subdividers
Yeah.
of lands, and we work along with other engineers and surveyors to get this type of projects completed.
Yeah. Second part of your team out of the 5 is your contractor, your construction team. Typically, there's 2 ways that this usually gets done. It's usually, hey, I haven't picked up the contractor, so I'm just going to do a bid, and that could work for you, especially if it's your first time doing a project. But a lot of times you may ask your engineer, hey, do you have a preferred contractor? And typically engineers will give you a very good idea of who they like to work with. And the reason they do this is because of 2 reasons. When I have contractors that I like to work with in my previous roles as an engineer, it was typically because, one, if change orders came up, they made it as easy, effective, and smooth as possible while charging a reasonable rate. 2, a lot of times they are contractors that are very experienced that if they found a mistake or they saw something, they immediately notify the engineer, and before creating a mess, they allow us to find a solution that is economical for the client. Now, there is cases where we have contractors where we've worked with that they charged a lot of change orders. They were very difficult to work with, not responsive. They were irresponsible. They lengthened the timeline. They cost a lot in change orders for the client. Just a bad experience. And a lot of times those end up being the low bidders, and they make a living off of change orders. And they win projects at a low rate and basically find a way to charge more throughout the process.
Those are typically the low bid. They tend to submit the lowest bid, and then throughout the process of the construction, you end up paying more than what the good contractor was going to charge you.
Yeah,
because maybe the good contractor already took into account all of those additional change orders.
Yep.
That the lowest bidder didn't.
And what are some things, even if they didn't charge you more, they could delay,
Yeah.
hey, there's a dispute here. And then you sit for a few months. That's not part of their timeline because you're disputing something. So now, guess what though? That doesn't affect your loan payment. You still have to make interest payments on your loan, regardless of whether it's sitting there a year or 2 years or whatever it is. That's not the banker's problem. That's a guaranteed interest that you're having to pay. So sometimes a bad contractor,
and
ends up costing you significantly more than a good contractor.
And I've seen that personally.
Yeah.
I mean, on one contract, we heard the lowest bidder. He ended up delaying the project. It ended up costing us a lot more money in interest. And by the end of the project, the second bidder, that was, the typical contractor that we used to work all the time, that was very qualified and know how to do his job, would have cost a lot less than the lowest bidder.
Yeah. Especially if you have a history and you know that they don't charge you change orders unless it's something that has to be charged. No one knew there was a gas line there. It wasn't on the survey. No one came out and marked it. No one knew it was there until you hit it. And I mean, it's unfortunate. Things like that do happen. There may have not come up on the title report. Like no one ever knew this was here, and they ran into it, or a water line. It happens pretty often that something like that happens, and that's a change order. Yeah, that's a change order, and unfortunately, those are what your contingencies are for, or something unexpected that wasn't accounted for. But those are things that happen in all types of projects, and hopefully it doesn't. But it should happen maybe 1 out of 10. If you're doing a good job, good design, good planning, good everything, it won't happen as often. It'll happen rarely. Okay, so that's on your construction. Your third team is your finance. So again, if you went and got your finances in order, as we told you here, and now you need to figure out which bank are you going to work with. And so part of identifying the project that you want is, hey, I want to do residential, single family homes. That's what I want to do. You can go to different banks, talk to your bank that you currently bank with. Do you give loans for this type of project? Not every bank loans money. And I would say a lot of times your local community banks are a good resource for getting loans because a lot of times the national firms aren't looking to, do investments a lot of times. If they do, it's like very low risk loans or maybe even if it's not high risk, there's just things that they don't loan on, regardless of whether there's risk or none, not involved.
Yeah, and our local banks, they're typically willing to work with the local developers to develop the cities where, they started.
Yeah. So local banks are a great resource, but yeah, talk to your bank, find the bank that you want to work with, share your
And,
information, and they can give you an idea of how much money they'd be able to lend you. Like, hey, based on your income, based on your debts, there's a certain amount we can lend you.
and,
And
and be ready. I mean, have your financials in place, you have an accountant, a bookkeeper that helps you get your finances in order so that whenever you go to the bank, you don't have to be going through years, previous unrecorded expenses or incomes. So just prepare yourself for loan applications as much
yeah.
as possible.
That fourth team is your sales and marketing. So you always, unless you're going to try to sell them yourself, which you very well can. I mean, I know some developers that I've talked to that they just put it on Facebook Marketplace and they end up selling all their lots. I mean, they don't have to pay for marketing. Again, that's very highly dependent. Sometimes you got to remember that some of these people may know a lot of people already. Some of these developers that do that, they may know a lot of other developers or builders that are interested in building homes. Like they may already have that network. So maybe they don't need marketing and they don't need sales because they already know 50 builders.
Buy
And
all the lots.
and when they put it on their for sale on their page on Facebook, hey, well, all these people already know them. They know that they had a subdivision. They've already talked to a couple of those people behind the scenes. And so as soon as their subdivision's ready, hey, pues they already have it half sold or more. And so they can immediately pay off their loan and the rest, I mean, they're just paying taxes until they can get rid of them themselves. Or you can go the other route, which is you hire, a
Realtor.
team, yeah, realtors, and basically it's typically by commission. It can be depending on the market, anywhere between 3.5% to 4% is generally what we've seen. There may be some better rates out there. There may be some worse, depending on the product that you're putting out, where it's located, and what they believe the demand is. I mean, if you have something that's going to sell itself, they may take a lower commission just to be able to guarantee that they'll sell it for you. Some are willing to take a lower commission if you only allow them to sell. Some are willing, to, hey, you know what? I don't care who sells on your subdivision, but this is the rate I go for. And so those are ways that you can work with realtors. And obviously, if you are putting those out, other realtors for buyers will bring them in and they would want a commission too. So sales and marketing, it's important to have. And your last is your legal team. So find a lawyer that specializes in this. Whether you want to go a little bit more on.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things that you need your contracts for, to do your sales, your title companies. During the development process, you may run into development issues at the city commission, zoning laws, etc.
So having a good lawyer that understands these things and can help you with not just your financial structure of your company, because having your company structured correctly is good.
Stay in compliance
And
on your LLCs and
yeah, having your meeting minutes every year, that was something we weren't doing originally. And, you know, after we brought on our attorney, that was one of the first things that we worked on was trying to get all our companies in compliance and making sure everything was done correctly. So that's another big thing that, I think maybe someone starting out may not understand the consequences of not having a properly structured company.
having a good contract for your contractor, for your engineer,
Yeah.
that could help avoid a lot of headaches during change orders and construction.
Yeah. Maybe have them review the contract that your engineer sends you or the contract that you want to give your contractor. Generally speaking, that's usually the way it goes is as an owner, you give a contract to your contractor. And typically when you hire an engineer, the engineer provides a contract to you for services. But, you can always have your lawyer view them and make sure there's nothing abusive on one end or the other. And if there are some things that you're not comfortable with, you can definitely, come to an agreement and speak to your engineer that, hey, these are some areas that I think are a little unfair. And I would like them to be changed or fixed. So yeah,
Oh,
this has been a longer episode than we were expecting.
yes.
But
Do you think land development is easy, Jacob?
buying the land is the easy part.
It's the easy part, yeah. I mean, land development is a complex process, and you need a team to be able to put out all these projects and protect yourself as well.
We went over a lot of things for rookies and new investors, and maybe some of these topics, even some current investors may find used to them, because if you weren't properly protecting yourself with your legal team, that's a something that you may have missed. That not doing your meeting minutes opens you to litigation, and so
It's called
the corporate veil.
the corporate barrel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you.
The corporate barrel. If you liked it and you believe that we're capable to help you out, reach out to us and we'll be happy to work with you on your land development projects. If you know somebody that this could help, share the video
Yeah, please share.
and pass it on to that young developer or investor, and maybe we can work something out to help them out. Subscribe if you like our content.
Yeah, and we'll keep working, and we'll keep doing this regardless if you subscribe or not, but it helps us know that we're bringing good material to you guys.
If you have comments, land development comments,
Yeah.
put them on the comment section and we'll try to review them and give you feedback on your land development projects or questions.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys. Bye bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.